Some moments destroy a person's dignity in seconds, and some moments restore it so completely that everyone who witnessed the humiliation is forced to question everything they believed. The entire bank lobby fell silent as a respected bank manager ripped a $5 million check into pieces right in front of a quiet Filipino man wearing faded clothes and worn-out shoes. The shredded paper drifted to the polished marble floor while security guards stepped closer, customers whispered, and embarrassed employees looked away. Everyone believed they had just watched a poor man try to commit fraud. No one noticed the calm expression on his face. No one expected that less than 10 minutes later, the bank owner's phone would ring, and the same manager who had destroyed the check would hear her own boss say only one sentence that changed everything: "Stand up immediately, and address that gentleman as sir." Before we continue, if you believe kindness should never depend on someone's appearance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Humanity Tales. Your support helps us bring more unforgettable stories that remind the world that humanity still exists. The man was named Matteo Santos, a 62-year-old Filipino who had spent most of his life working with his hands instead of chasing recognition. Deep wrinkles covered his face, his dark skin carried years of tropical sunlight, and his simple button-down shirt had been carefully washed so many times that its original color had almost disappeared. Every morning he still polished his old shoes, not because they looked expensive but because his late wife had always told him that self-respect could never be bought. Matteo had buried her 5 years earlier after a long illness that consumed every peso they had saved. Since then, he lived quietly in a modest coastal village, helping fishermen repair boats, fixing broken furniture for neighbors, and mentoring children whose fathers worked overseas. Most people assumed he had nothing left except memories. What nobody knew was that Matteo had once made a promise to his childhood best friend many decades earlier. As young men, they had dreamed of escaping poverty together. One stayed in the Philippines. The other emigrated to America, where years of determination transformed him into a remarkably successful entrepreneur. Despite oceans separating them, they exchanged letters every Christmas until age and business slowly interrupted their communication. Matteo never expected to hear from him again. Then, only a month earlier, an international law firm contacted him with astonishing news. His lifelong friend had passed away without children and had left behind a detailed will. Inside it was a heartfelt letter thanking Matteo for teaching him honesty when they were boys, for lending him money for his first passport despite having almost nothing himself, and for proving that true friendship never depended on wealth. Along with the letter came a certified $5 million check and instructions that the money should be used however Matteo wished, with the hope that he would continue helping others just as he always had. Matteo cried for hours after reading that letter. The money represented more wealth than he had ever imagined, yet his first thoughts were not about luxury. He planned scholarships for village students, medical assistance for elderly neighbors, safer fishing boats for struggling families, and a community library dedicated to his late wife, who had loved reading despite never finishing school. He slept peacefully that night, believing life had given him one final opportunity to leave something meaningful behind. A week later, carrying the carefully protected check inside a weathered envelope, Matteo traveled several hours by bus to the city's main branch of an internationally respected bank. He quietly waited his turn, smiling politely at everyone around him. Some customers ignored him. Others assumed he had come to ask for financial assistance. His humble appearance made him nearly invisible. When his turn finally arrived, he presented the documents with both hands. The young employee initially smiled politely but soon frowned while examining the amount printed on the check. She excused herself and disappeared into a nearby office. Minutes later, the branch manager emerged wearing an elegant business suit, expensive jewelry, and the confident expression of someone accustomed to making immediate judgments. She barely looked at Matteo before looking repeatedly at the check. Her eyes moved from the enormous amount to his inexpensive clothes. Instead of asking questions, verifying documents, or contacting headquarters, she allowed assumptions to become facts inside her own mind. She concluded that no ordinary-looking man could possibly possess a legitimate $5 million check. The atmosphere inside the lobby slowly changed as employees gathered nearby. Curious customers pretended not to watch while secretly listening. Matteo remained patient, believing a routine verification process was underway. Instead, the manager publicly accused him of presenting fraudulent financial documents and implied that criminals often targeted banks using forged international checks. Her words echoed across the room. Every sentence chipped away at Matteo's dignity, but he continued standing quietly, refusing to argue. Then came the moment nobody would forget. In a burst of anger meant to demonstrate authority, the manager seized the check, tore it into several pieces, and dropped them onto the polished floor in front of him. Gasps spread across the lobby. Security guards approached Matteo while several customers shook their heads with pity. The manager believed she had protected the bank from an attempted scam. Matteo looked down at the torn pieces. He did not shout. He did not threaten anyone. He simply bent slowly, picked up every fragment with trembling hands, placed them back inside the envelope, and whispered a silent prayer for patience. His late wife had often reminded him that anger could win an argument but lose a person's character. Remembering her words became the only thing keeping him composed. Meanwhile, one thoughtful employee quietly examined the legal documents Matteo had submitted alongside the check. Something seemed unusual. Every signature appeared authentic. The law firm certification carried internationally recognized seals. Concerned that a terrible mistake might have occurred, she discreetly contacted the bank's corporate verification department. Only minutes later, headquarters confirmed that the check number was genuine. Panic spread through the verification team. Even more alarming was the identity of the sender. The deceased businessman had been one of the bank's most respected global investment clients for decades. His accounts had generated millions in revenue for the institution. The payment to Matteo was not only legitimate but had already been pre-approved within the bank's international transfer system. Corporate executives immediately called the regional director. The regional director personally called the bank owner's office. Then the owner's direct call reached the branch manager. Every employee watched as confidence disappeared from her face. The color drained from her cheeks while her hands began to shake. Nobody could hear the full conversation, but everyone heard one unforgettable sentence spoken loudly through the phone. "Stand up immediately, and address that gentleman as sir." Silence consumed the entire bank. The manager slowly turned toward Matteo, who still stood peacefully holding the envelope containing the torn pieces of the check. Only now did she fully realize that she had not merely insulted a customer. She had humiliated an honorable man whose integrity exceeded anything money could measure. Within minutes, senior executives rushed to the branch. They personally apologized for the treatment Matteo had endured and assured him that a replacement check would be issued immediately through the legal representatives. They offered private banking services, luxury transportation, complimentary financial management, and every possible convenience. Matteo listened respectfully. Yet something inside him remained heavier than the envelope he carried. He explained that the greatest loss was not the destroyed paper. Checks could be replaced. Money could be transferred again. But public humiliation left invisible scars that could not be repaired with compensation. He quietly observed the frightened employees surrounding him and reminded everyone that countless honest people experience similar treatment every day simply because their clothes are old, their jobs are ordinary, or their faces are unfamiliar. His words spread through the bank more powerfully than any executive order. Several younger employees lowered their heads in shame, realizing how often they had unconsciously judged customers before speaking to them. Even security guards admitted they had approached Matteo because they assumed the manager's judgment must be correct. The bank owner arrived personally that afternoon, something almost unheard of for a single customer complaint. Instead of focusing on financial damages, he spent hours listening to Matteo's life story. By the end of their meeting, he announced sweeping changes across every branch. Customer service training would no longer emphasize appearance, clothing, or first impressions. Employees would receive education on unconscious bias, dignity, empathy, and respect. New policies ensured that every customer, regardless of social status, would receive equal treatment during document verification. When journalists later learned about the incident, many expected Matteo to file an enormous lawsuit. Lawyers even volunteered to represent him for free. The financial compensation could have been substantial. Matteo declined every offer. Instead, he requested only one thing. He asked the bank to help establish scholarship programs for underprivileged Filipino students interested in finance, ethics, and public service. He believed the greatest response to injustice was creating future leaders who would never repeat the same mistake. Months later, the scholarships transformed lives across several provinces. Children from fishing villages, farming communities, and struggling neighborhoods entered universities with hope their families had never imagined possible. Matteo also fulfilled every promise he had made after receiving his inheritance. The community library opened in his wife's memory. New fishing boats improved safety for local families. Medical assistance reached elderly residents who had quietly suffered for years. The fortune that many expected would create luxury instead created opportunity. Ironically, the bank itself became stronger because of one painful afternoon. Customer satisfaction rose. Employee culture changed. Respect replaced arrogance. New recruits studied Matteo's story during orientation as a reminder that every person entering the building carried a history invisible to the human eye. Years later, visitors entering that branch noticed a simple framed quote displayed near the entrance. It did not mention millions of dollars or corporate success. It simply read, "Character cannot be measured by clothing, and dignity should never require proof." Matteo often smiled whenever children asked why people treated him with such respect. He never spoke about the torn check first. Instead, he told them that wealth was temporary, titles eventually disappeared, but kindness remained the only investment that continued earning interest long after a person was gone. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your family and friends, subscribe to Humanity Tales, and leave a heartfelt comment. Your support allows these stories of compassion and hope to reach more people around the world. Before this story ends, tell us in the comments, have you ever been judged by your appearance, and what lesson did that experience teach you? The torn check was eventually replaced. $5 million found its rightful owner. But the greatest miracle that day was not the fortune itself. It was the moment an entire room learned that true value is never found in a person's clothes, their bank balance, or the assumptions others make. It lives quietly inside the choices they make when nobody is watching, and sometimes, the richest person in the room is the one who never needed wealth to prove their worth.